What is up, fanatics? This is Josh Fanguy bringing you the fourth installment of the Ultimate Fan Guy. Again, I'm Josh Fanguy. That is my real name. And it was super appropriate for me. I have pretty strong opinions on everything. Today's episode is brought to you by S-Smart. It's not really brought to you by S-Smart, but I figured I'd make an Evil Dead reference seeing as we're getting into a pretty cool topic, one of my favorite topics today, which is video games. This was a hard list to compile because I love video games and I have played a ton of them in my life. So today we're going to bring you my top 11 video games of all time. Now, before we get into the list, I would like to make a little bit of a caveat here, and that is I did not include multiple games from the same franchise. So, if there's a, Legend of Zelda game on this list, I only chose one, even though I may love quite a few of them. Same for you get the idea. Now, later this week, I am going to be making a video about the top franchise video games of all time. And that's when we'll kind of get into the penultimate list of franchises and what we think about them. So, to start the list, I do have, I love video games so much, I couldn't even do top 11. It turned into kind of a top 12. But my honorable mention on the list is a game that recently came out. I don't think it's been out long enough for it to bring home a spot on this list just yet. So it does get the honorable mention spot. And that is, as you can see, Red Dead Redemption 2. This game is good. I put quite a few hours into it before beating it. It's a pretty long game. It's a quality game. They did a damn good job with it. The multiplayer isn't as good in my opinion, but the game itself, like the campaign story mode, it's got a good story, some memorable characters, a few twists and turns here and there. The gameplay is amazing. It's very open worldy. Even though the quests are somewhat linear, but there's a lot to do. You can hunt legendary animals. There's just a big map to explore. Different horses to try out. Lots of cool weapons. Definitely a cool game. It just came out in the last year. If you haven't checked this game out, it is definitely worth playing. Again, it just hasn't been out long enough for it to overtake any of the other things on this list, which some are, purely mine because of nostalgia, but some of them are, arguably great games according to everyone. So again, this is my list, and this is in no way a comprehensive list of picks from around the internet. This is just my personal favorite 11 games of all time. So we're going to move on to number 11. And speaking of the Zelda franchise, this one was a tough one to call because I was really going back and forth between Ocarina of Time, which is what I chose, and A Link to the Past, which was the last Super Nintendo Legend of Zelda game. Both of them were fantastic. And in some ways, I think I like The Link to the Past more because the story just drug me in. I was a little younger when I started playing it. But Ocarina of Time was a revolutionary game for its time. It had come out for N64. It was the first kind of open world Zelda. It was right there with the Super Mario Quest for the Stars game, where it was very, very open world. It was, a 3D environment, which we weren't used to. And this game was long. It was deep. It had a lot of cool content. I remember vividly when, Nintendo 64 had first come out. This was just the hotness. Due to nostalgia and the fact that it's just an amazing game, this is easily on my list. It comes in at number 11. Number 10. This is actually going to be, spoiler alert, the only shooter on my list. I'm not the biggest shooter person. I have chosen Halo 2. Halo 2, over all the other Halos. Mostly, this is a lot of nostalgia pick for me. I used to stay up with a group of friends playing this every night. we had our core little group that used to play multiplayer on this. It was the first game, or Halo, the original Halo multiplayer was pretty cool too, but Halo 2, it really brought like the online multiplayer aspect into everything. It was the first one with, I believe, the swords. Uh, Again, this one was kind of a nostalgia pick for me, but I may have dumped more overall hours into Halo 2 than maybe any other game I've ever played. Uh, it deserved a spot on my list. I even met arguably the love of my life playing Halo 2. So it has a special place in my heart, and it could not have made this list without including it somewhere on it. So Halo 2, the whole Halo franchise is great, but Halo 2 is the one that sticks out the most for me. Moving on to number 9, GTA 5. I have picked GTA 5. All the Grand Theft Autos are pretty cool. And this is the only game of this sort of genre that's on this list. I thoroughly enjoyed all the Saints Rows. I've played all the Saints Rows. Um, I've played all the Grand Theft Autos. 5, probably because it was the most recent, is the best. They had the most to work with technology wise. The game is the longest. It's got some very memorable characters. Trevor is awesome. Um, it's got uh, you know uh, uh, it's just got memorable characters. It's got tons of side missions. It's got tons of main quest missions. It's got a funny little main storyline. Um, it's just a great game. It really is. Lincoln, Michael, Trevor. These are all just memorable characters. It's easy to lose yourself playing this game for a while. Uh, there's not too much of a storyline to it. I mean, there is, but it's kind of all over the place because it follows several people. But obviously, I think it's one of my top 10 video games of all time. So if you, for whatever reason, you've been living under a rock and haven't checked out GTA 5, it's been out for a little while now. It is a fantastic game and a worthy inclusion on this list. Number 8, League of Legends. So this is no, there's 2 others. This is one of the only non-console games that's on my list. And again, a lot of this list is made up of games that I kind of just look at how much time I poured into them, and based on that, I can kind of determine how much I like a game. This is a game where, I mean, it's an online MOBA where you have to play with 4 other teammates against an opposing team of 5 to cross a map and take out checkpoints along the way to their base. Currently, actually, the World Championships are going on right now in Europe, and League of Legends is an interesting game because, I mean, the community is one of the worst communities of all time, right? It's super toxic. There's a lot of angry people who are mad at the world that play this game, and they are not shy about letting you know how bad you suck if you're having a bad game, which sucks. I think it turns a lot of new players off. I think it keeps a lot of people from getting into the game because there's a really steep learning curve to it. Because all of the people who are getting their accounts banned are constantly starting new accounts. And if you're a legitimate new player, you're probably playing with not only people that are more experienced than you, but also the worst of the worst. So, that's what frustrates me about League of Legends is that it can't pick up new players because the current players are such dickweeds. Like, they really are. But if you can look past the community, which is tough sometimes, the game is great. It's they're constantly coming out with new characters to play. There's like 150 plus characters to learn and play in this game. It's a very deep game in terms of learning all the characters for when you play them and when you play against them. And there's several different game modes. It's one that if you have a pretty thick skin and you haven't tried it and you have a computer, give it a shot. But turn off all chat. don't mess with the community unless it's, people who are cool and going to help you learn and not break you down. But I have so many hours into this game, and it is fun. So it obviously is going to make my list at number 8. Number 7. Now this is a game that I would say the majority of people watching this video are not going to even be aware of, and yet it's on my top 10 list. And it's called The Grid. It is a arcade game that came in the style you see right here. It was a battleground. It was kind of a shooter too, with a trackball, and it had all the. I believe it was a Konami game. I know it's a Midway game. It's a Midway game. It has like Scorpion and Sub-Zero, but they're not main characters, they're like hidden characters. And it has like a regular tier of characters. It's got like a little punch code thing, like a numerical keypad that you enter passwords with when you unlock characters. I remember I was maybe 20 or 19 or 18, and I used to just own this at the arcade where I lived. I would just sit on it all day and crush everyone who came. I won the first inaugural tournament of this game. Each character has its own little secret power, but otherwise it's just an open battlefield, shooter. But it used a trackball and a flight stick to control things. There was a lot of cool weapons, a lot of cool stuff you could do, a great variety of characters, especially if you knew the secret code to unlock them. I've been looking for one of these games for so long, like an actual arcade version that wasn't super expensive, but they are super hard to find. This game is super hard to find. And for me, it was tragic that they never made it into a console game because based on my list, this is my favorite, I guess, action shooter of all time. This thing was awesome. And I'd say check it out if you can. But the truth is you probably can't because that they just don't make this game anymore, and it's really hard to find. But based on the simple nostalgia and the amount of fun and the amount of people's quarters I took playing this game, it had to make my list, and it is an amazing game. So if you ever get a chance to walk into a random arcade somewhere and you get a chance to play it, definitely play The Grid. It is worth a shot. A little hard to get used to the trackball though, if you're not that kind of gamer. Next, Diablo 3. This was also a tough call because I enjoyed Diablo 2 a lot. But I think 3, just due to it being more recent, better graphics, not as good PvP, seeing as 3 doesn't really even have PvP. But I think it's significantly better PvE. And the fact that they do seasons and you can constantly start new characters and still have fun with new item sets and stuff like that, for me, gave it a leg up on Diablo 2. It's a great PvE game to play with your friends. It doesn't get too competitive or mean-spirited with regards to that. I believe it's out on console now as well. I personally play it on PC, but it's just a good game. There's a lot of content, a lot of cool bosses. They're actually adding new classes and expansions, semi-frequently. Enough for a Blizzard game. And Diablo 3, I mean, it's something I'm actually playing right now. Whenever I just am looking for kind of a hack and slasher, kind of just a mindless getaway where you could just mindlessly hack and slash your way through enemies. It's really cool. There's even a hardcore mode where if you die, you lose your character in your game. So that's not for the faint of heart. But Diablo 3 is a killer game. It's a lot of fun to play. And it is also a worthy inclusion on this list. Moving on. This one was a slam dunk. And if I was including multiple games from one franchise on this list, it is very, very conceivable that both Fallout 4 and Fallout New Vegas would have made my list. I enjoy both of the games thoroughly. Again, you're going to notice the trend here. I think 4 is better because it's more recent. It has a lot of new cool features that New Vegas and 3 didn't have, like a community builder type thing. Its world is huge. It's got tons of content, um, and it's a great game. If you're not familiar with the Fallout franchise, they're post-apocalyptic games. They take place after a nuclear attack on the United States that forces people to go hiding into vaults, which are underground facilities where they can survive the impending nuclear fallout. And it kind of takes place once the main extreme radiation is stopped and the world is rebuilding itself. It's a super cool concept. It is a very cool game. Lots of weapons, companions, quests, a pretty cool main storyline in all of them. Fallout 3 is amazing. New Vegas is amazing. 4 is amazing. But Bethesda really did a good job with this series. Again, 4 just tops my list because it's just got the most features, the best graphics, the best engine. It's just the newest. And I'm trying, a lot of these games are nostalgia based, but when it comes to picking my favorite game from franchises, most of the time the newest game is going to be the best due to the enhanced stuff that it provides. So if you're not familiar with the Fallout series, definitely, definitely worth checking out. Absolutely amazing games with some pretty cool storylines that are set in a very cool environment. Moving on, this is where things kind of got hard for me to put the numbers up. My top 4 were really close to one another. They're easily my 4 favorite games of all time, and number 4, just by a hair, is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords. Now, not only was this super close to the next 3 games in terms of where I rank them, but this was close to the first game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the first one. This is an older game. It's an amazing game. I believe it's on Steam with controller support right now. The first one is also on Steam, but without controller support for some reason, which really annoys me. So maybe I prefer 2 because I've always played it with a controller back when it was on like Xbox. I've played them both on Xbox, love them both, but because I can't replay 1 these days without with a controller, I think it for me it actually gave 2 the edge here. Both games are amazing. They're set in the Star Wars universe where you are you get to choose your class. You don't, have much memory of your past or what's going on. And the story just kind of unfolds as you pick which kind of in the second one, you pick which sort of Jedi or Sith you want to be. It's got the classic light, dark decision-making scale that actually influences what kind of force powers you can use. The story is great. There's a lot of side content here as well. Lightsaber construction. I mean, it's just a cool game. And it's very nostalgic for me. I'm a massive, massive Star Wars fan. And this is my favorite Star Wars game of all time. Closely followed, I think, by the X-Wing flight series, but now I'm getting off track. This is just a good game. A lot of cool characters, memorable characters, great storyline. Worth checking out if you haven't played Knights of the Old Republic, for sure. Number 3, Skyrim. I will never forget when this came out. I went to the midnight release at my local GameStop and got this game at midnight, picked up some good Whataburger to go with it, and I cracked out on this thing for days. Days turned into weeks, turned into months. The cool thing about Skyrim is they've been really good about adding new stuff over time. They've added a lot of expansions, a lot of new content, so that the game is still the game it was when it first came out, but they've really added a lot of cool features and a lot of cool things to it. Um, you can sink so many hours into this game and still not do everything there is to do on the map. It's very open world. You can kind of do things at your own pace. The main story is linear, but you definitely don't have to. It's not linear in terms of when you have to do it. It's just the main storyline is a certain set of checkpoints that you must go through, but like you don't ever really even have to do it. There's that much side content. Um, this is my favorite Elder Scrolls game, although I did love Morrowind and Oblivion. They're both good games. But again, this one was just the most recent. It's the most technologically advanced. There's the most to do. Prefer the combat. This game, without giving too many spoilers outside of the first 5 minutes, it's set in a Nordic sort of environment where basically the game opens up and you're on a cart on your way to get executed by the Imperials, who are like the Roman soldiers, I guess. And then I'm not even want to give a spoiler that happens right after that in case you haven't played it. But the game is based around a lot of dragons and evil Daedric gods and stuff like that. It's one of the deepest games I've ever played. And if for whatever reason you're on this list and you haven't played Skyrim, this might be the game more than any of them that I think would appeal to everyone. And it's super, super worth a look. You can play as a warrior, an archer, a mage, and you can kind of go interchangeable with them as you so choose. So it's pretty cool and easily one of my favorite games of all time. Numero dos, Dragon Age Origins. This is one of the few games on the list where I prefer the first one to the second one or the third one even. Now, Inquisition was pretty good, and it was the most recent one, and it was the most technologically advanced, and it was a good game. But Dragon Age Origins, the original for me, will always have the most special place in my heart. The story of this game is amazing. Um, the characters are amazing. The only thing I think is somewhat of a downside to Dragon Age, if I had to give any cons, is that I wish there was more varied equipment. I mean, there's still quite a bit. Like, you can still get quite a bit of different equipment, but there's not too much customization. It's, there are some pretty static best things as far as items go, but the story more than makes up for this. This is, just a cool game. It's got different starting points depending on which race you pick. Um, a lot of very memorable characters and interactions. If you like RPGs and you haven't messed with the Dragon Age series, don't skip to the end. Start with this one if you can. It is, it's a little clunky with combat at times, but just a whole heap of awesomeness all at once. So Dragon Age Origins, my number 2 game of all time. It is a freaking blast. And my number 1 game, I'll give you a hint. I'm very excited about this coming March when this remake happens. It is Final Fantasy VII. This is another franchise where if I was allowed to list multiple Final Fantasy games, or if I allowed myself to list multiple Final Fantasy games on this list, this is going to be the highest. But Final Fantasy IX is amazing. Final Fantasy III is amazing. Final Fantasy I is amazing. 8 is okay. The one with Blitzball, which I'm not sure if it's 10, 11, or 12. It's one of them. Is super amazing too. Three or four of those could have easily made the list. I hate to give a spoiler for my upcoming franchise episode, but just by the sheer number of games I just mentioned that are on my top list, you can probably assume what my number one game franchise of all time is going to be. But this, for me, is the best of them. It is fairly linear in terms of gameplay, which it's strange that it's my number one because I prefer more open world games when it comes to RPGs. But this has the best story ever, ever. It's the first video game that I remember that elicited true emotions from me when I was playing it, which there's no, substitute for that. It's got just a cool story. For its time when it first came out, the graphics were amazing. Now, if you looked at it before the remake, it's kind of like, what? Very blocky, polygony, but it follows, without getting too many spoilers here, it starts with this guy who can't really remember much about himself. He's a member of a terrorist unit that is, but they're like a good terrorist unit where they're trying to stop the evil corporation from poisoning the planet. And then the whole story just kind of unfolds from there, and it becomes something completely different. There's a lot of cool little side games, and oh man, it's just so this one may be just a pure nostalgia pick, but for me, this one's all about the story. Now, don't get me wrong, combat sequences are it's turn based, but there are some battles in this game like they're not necessary battles; they're optional battles, like against the Emerald weapon, Omega weapon, Ruby weapon. These fights can take upwards of an hour with a very strong team. And I'll never forget the satisfaction I got the first time we beat the Emerald weapon. Me and my stepbrother Mike played this game nonstop for one summer of our lives, and there's just so much to do in this game. So many memorable characters. The dialogue is so well written, and you actually care about the characters. So if you haven't checked out Final Fantasy VII, that's okay. Don't yet, because in March they're doing a remake. And March 20th, I believe, it's coming out. And it's apparently going to be a remastered version. And I can't wait for it. Like, I'm getting it the day it comes out. So my favorite video game of all time, hands down, Final Fantasy VII, the best of the Final Fantasies. Thank you for stopping by the Ultimate Fan Guide today. I hope you enjoyed this list. If you did, or if you didn't, tell me it in the comments. Like, subscribe. It's all appreciated. I really appreciate you fanatics hanging out with me today as we discuss this stuff. Stay tuned tomorrow or the next day for our next topic, which we got a lot of them listed. We might be doing soundtracks next. But either way, it's going to be a good time. So thanks for coming by, and I hope to see you soon.